everyone, welcome back to, we called the first one Chats with Dad, number 1. So this will be Chats with Pharmacist Dad, number 2.
Number 2.
Episode number 2. And the first episode, if you have not already seen it, we talked about all things nutrition, really good conversation, and a holistic approach to nutrition, and we really enjoyed it. So we decided to dive into a little bit of a different topic today, and this would be my father's expertise, pharmaceuticals and the drug culture that we live in. Maybe some of the things that were sold by marketing, by TV ads, by Big Pharma that maybe we don't recognize. And I mean, I know you've given me, just growing up, an inside look as to potentially some of the things that we may not see, because if you're not working in the pharmacy or you're not having like an inside look as an average American, you may not understand some of the money that's behind the scenes that influence drugs, influence the culture we live in. And so we wanted to dive into that because I think it's something that a lot of individuals, their eyes are kind of being open to it. The talk about Big Pharma and what does that actually mean. So we wanted to dive into that and explain some things to potentially look out for, and then how can you be better equipped to make more informed decisions for yourself. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of information that we receive in our lives, we just assume it's true, and we often don't question what's behind the information.
Yeah.
And so I do want to make a disclaimer, though, that, I mean, these are my opinions of over 40 years practice as a pharmacist in a variety of different roles. And but it's not intended to be information for you to use to make changes without your primary care physician. So please don't stop medication suddenly because I scare the heck out of you. I want to inform you more than anything. I want to empower you to go out and get more information and really try to understand yourself and your health better, and understand the information that you're fed every day in our culture.
Yeah, and think critically too.
Right.
That's something that is almost a superpower nowadays with the overload of information I think we have. Not only with media, but also with social media, or normal kind of standard media, but now social media, influencers, all kinds of quote experts online.
See, and one of the things they'll try and do is overwhelm you with scientific detail.
Yes.
That you can't possibly validate or question. And they tell you to trust the science. Truth of the matter is, you probably should trust principles more than the science, because science by its nature is always changing, always. And you should question the science. That is science, questioning, the status quo.
Very true.
Yeah.
And science can change too. And that's something we're going to dive into a little bit with some drugs being pulled from the market, and some of the side effects that have later on been discovered with certain drugs and pharmaceuticals. So kind of to start off, what's your overall perspective, especially working in a pharmacy for so long, and then obviously in different realms in the healthcare industry, our culture at large? What is the, you think about the TV ads you see for pharmaceuticals, for drugs, like what would you say that our culture has been taught to expect when it comes to now kind of this Western medicine approach, and what would you say the biggest problem is with a lot of the money that's been pumped into TV ads and our culture from Big Pharma, and like where are we at as a society?
Okay, so
that's a loaded question.
That was a lot. I'm not sure I could follow every detail on that. But
where are we at?
Where are we
at large?
We live in a drug culture. I mean, that's the bottom line. Every day, all of us are inundated with messages that tell us that there's a drug that can fix whatever problem you have. And if I just say some of the the drug ads like plop plop, fizz fizz, what a relief it is, people my age would immediately think of an antacid drug. but that's continued. It's in the movies. It's in social
I
media.
wondered where you were going with that. I was like, what is this? Never heard
It,
that.
it's on billboards. You get mailings. Sporting events are sponsored by drugs. Doctors' offices have literature throughout them on medications. So, as a society, we want quick fix solutions, not just with things that drugs can treat, but just in general. We want things to be as quick and as efficient as possible because we're overwhelmed, basically, with life. So we've been taught to expect this, a quick fix, instantaneous solutions, and it kind of permeates into our lives. And you see it in our food, our results. We want quick delivery, we want education in as short a time period as possible, and we want good health as quickly as possible. And so drugs play into that.
So capitalizing really on our desire for quickness and for an instant solution, and companies they're not dumb. They know how to capitalize on people's fear and on people's desires for quick fixes and for instantaneous results. And it's interesting because the fads that you see, a lot of times it is a quick solution. You notice the duration. It's advertised as being instantaneous, or in 3 months your life will get better, or 5 days of taking this pill, like magic pill. And so it is capitalizing, I think, on individuals' desperations. And it could be a really some people are very miserable in their state of unhealth, and it is.
Well, just think about food, just like we talked about last time. We want pre-prepared food with preservatives because it makes our life instantaneous and quick and easy. So we do it with everything.
Recognizing too, like, nothing quick and easy in life comes without its there has to be some sort of give and take.
Right.
Everything that's quick and easy and too good to be true usually means it is.
Right.
So what is Big Pharma?
So you hear that term all the time, right? Big Pharma. Big Pharma is the pharmaceutical companies. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Some of the big names: Pfizer, Bayer, Johnson and Johnson, but there's many pharmaceutical companies. So Big Pharma, really got started with like Bayer aspirin and some of those products that we still use today. But they grew into an industry that realized that if they could patent solutions to our health needs, utilizing medications, that they could make a lot of money. And so, you look today, this huge business, they dominate TV advertising. It's about 75% of the revenue of the TV advertisements. They spend about $2 billion per year on TV alone.
So every single ad you see on TV, 75% is Big Pharma.
Yeah. Just think of all the ads for eczema, psoriasis, ulcerative colitis, ED, just on and on and on.
Right.
Especially sports. It's just like every ad is some kind of drug manufacturer advertisement. So, they say, if you go and you search this, that about 2.8% of Big Pharma's revenue is spent on marketing. And then they spend 25% on research and development. But it's fuzzy science because most of the research and development is done at universities. So a place like Ohio State, they have professors and researchers there that are doing research for Big Pharma. They have the expertise, but they have something else there that's really important, and that's an audience. And so the medical, pharmacy, nursing schools are really funded by grants from pharma. And so our educations are very biased.
Right.
And so we're told by the faculty that this is the latest and the greatest and a big breakthrough, and it's going to reset the protocols for treatment. And that's what we take from our education, and we expect it and we promote it, thinking that we're honestly promoting what we think is the best therapy for the given disease. So I don't know. There's this mad scramble in pharma to get new patents, because if you don't have a patent to protect your drug, other people can make generics then, right?
Right.
And so there's this mad scramble for new drug entities. And my
Quick definition, what is a generic?
A generic is the same molecule, but it's not owned by the original innovator of the drug.
Okay.
And so you get generics from multiple companies across the world. Some of them come from China and may or may not have the medication you think is in there. But
that's why third-party testing on your drugs is very important as well.
Very
where
important.
You get your drugs. And
so even where we have the assurance that there is third-party testing, sometimes it's not always accurate. But the top 10 pharma companies, their revenue is about $425 billion per year.
Ooh.
Their net profit is between 12 and 14%. So it's easy number. It'd be about $45 billion in net profit. That's after expenses, right? So,
so there is a big monetary incentive to fund research at universities and come up with drugs that are patented that cannot be competed against, essentially, right?
Right. And then the researchers that are involved in that, their whole career is based on innovation and getting published in a professional journal. And so researchers develop a new product, they want to publish it in a professional journal that is supposedly peer-reviewed. But even though they've done the research, they've written the article, they never submit the final report without a review by pharma. Pharma is always does the final editing of anything they've funded before it's submitted to these journals.
So then how do you know what drugs are safe and what are not?
Well, we'd like to think that there's some credibility there, but there's a lot of incentive to take shortcuts.
Yeah.
And there's incentives to maybe omit certain studies that aren't convenient, which we saw with some vaccines.
Right.
They just omitted the effect of the COVID vaccine on pregnancy and on children.
And young men and the prevalence of myocarditis.
Right, right. So we now know that they had data. They actually considered putting out warnings on myocarditis.
And that was Pfizer, correct?
It was multiple companies, really. It actually was multiple companies. But anyways, so your professors in medical and pharmacy education are incentivized to promote the latest drugs to students because of this close relationship with pharma. And just by their nature, these researchers, they love innovative new therapies and mechanisms. They love being part of a new discovery that can be patented, and many of them can make large sums of money because they usually get a piece of the revenues from those new drug therapies. So, and I got to tell you that most of us in the medical community assume that if it's in a journal, it's reliable.
Right.
If it's peer-reviewed and included in a presentation at a conference, it must be true. And nothing can be farther from the truth. There's this website called Retraction Watch, and it keeps track of all the articles that are in peer-reviewed professional journals that have been retracted or pulled from the journal because of inconsistencies, inaccuracies, misinformation.
So these were peer-reviewed?
These were peer-reviewed.
Okay.
And we have a terrible trend in this country. In 2002, there were 119 papers retracted. In 2022, just a couple of years ago, we had 5,500 pulled. And you think, why would this be happening? Well, because there's such an incentive to try and get your papers accepted for your career track
Mm,
and also potentially to get paid by pharma,
mm.
that researchers will take shortcuts.
Ooh. So, what would you say then is what is the biggest risk with all of this in terms of the average person and being on, let's say, a couple of different medications that was recommended by their doctor? And what would you say is like, okay, the biggest thing to consider before saying yes to a pharmaceutical drug?
Well, I would never take a new drug
Hmm.
ever.
Yeah.
Um, I would wait until a drug is on the market 5 years.
So that's
Um,
probably the new drugs are what it's important to wait and
it is
see.
important to
Yeah.
wait, yeah,
Okay.
because you can't possibly trust that all the data was included in the approval process
Mm,
with the FDA.
mm,
And so if you wait 5 years, not obviously if you have cancer and life expectancy is short, you're going to do things you wouldn't
right.
normally do.
Right.
But I'm just saying in general, if there's a new drug, new class that comes out,
Hmm.
I would be very slow in adopting
Mm.
that therapy into my treatment.
And
And
also, I think that kind of goes into long-term studies. A lot of these drugs probably there have not been a lot. The long-term studies have not. The drugs haven't been around long enough for there to be long-term studies,
right, right, right.
right? On the results long term. Yeah.
And pharma, once they get approval, they're pretty lazy about
Mm,
tracking patients
mm,
and using that data to critique the drug's
mm,
performance and safety. Um, and it's usually discovered by a third party.
mm.
Um, and
Yeah.
as we've discussed, there's been a number of drugs that have been pulled from the market because after it had been on the market for a while, and it can range from a decade to a few years to even a few months,
Mm,
they discover that, oh, nope, something's not right
mm,
here.
mm,
And sometimes it's drugs that seem very similar to what's already on the market. So why
mm,
would you pull it? A good example was Vioxx, which was an anti-inflammatory, much like ibuprofen
mm,
or Celebrex, but it significantly increased cardiovascular risk.
mm.
And so it and another anti-inflammatory both were pulled within um, probably a year or less of being on the market.
Mm.
And so that's why I say wait. Um,
And I think that this ties into as well the problem of our compartmentalized health that we're, and I've talked to so many different people, myself included, where you have, let's say, high TSH or your thyroid's a little bit off. And so you go to an endocrinologist and then they do your blood work and they're like, oh, well, it's in the normal range. Like maybe, come back later or something like that. Or you go to a different doctor and you find you have high cholesterol, so then you go to a specialist for that instead of like a holistic look at what
hmm,
is your diet, what is your exercise, what is your lifestyle, what are some things we can maybe tweak from a holistic perspective as opposed to this very compartmentalized look at health. And recently I was talking to someone actually who I shared in the last episode that we have that I struggle with frequent heartburn. And I actually was talking to someone who, and my dad and I have been treating it now, and it's so, I mean, it's like I have so much better, praise God. But um, someone I was talking to, it was so compartmentalized that their doctor was sending them to a someone that specialized. They thought it might be like stomach cancer, and then another person was like throat.
hmm,
I don't know. So it was all this different instead of it actually came down to a pharmaceutical he was taking that was causing flare ups.
oh,
And so he went to a holistic doctor finally, and he said, "Stop taking this pharmaceutical and let's see if it stop." And it completely went
stopped.
away. So this almost this very narrow view of different specialties, I think sometimes almost misses like we miss the forest among the trees with doctors and with taking care of your health. And that's something that I've seen not only with myself and struggling to find good doctors over the years that will, have a holistic perspective, but also so many of I feel like my clients and my friends and other people in the healthcare or fitness world have really had a hard time. And honestly, your recommendations have helped me more than anyone else because it's
Mm,
from a holistic perspective, and you're
mm,
not anti-pharmaceuticals when it's necessary, but yet at the same time, I think you can see that it's not a perfect solution
right.
and there's side effects. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's just the majority of Americans don't have that knowledge. And so they think it's just a magic pill, when in reality, it may be more of a holistic view that will help solve some of these issues. And also, sometimes these pharmaceuticals may have side effects that you never anticipated would happen,
Right.
too, which is can
Yeah.
be a danger.
Well, it's interesting in the healthcare industry. You basically get um, single solutions from healthcare providers depending on what their focus is.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you go to most pharmacists and you get a drug solution, or you go to
Mm.
most physicians, you get a usually a drug solution based on protocols that have come through the universities, been in journals, been at conferences. You go to a surgeon, they want us cut. Um, you
Mm.
go to an endocrinologist that's a surgeon, they probably want to remove your thyroid, you know.
Yeah.
And so you got to be very discerning. There's a lot of different approaches. Our systems are so complex.
Right.
Just think about it. They're now associating the butt biome, the
But
health,
did you say
the
but?
the gut. I might have said butt, but I meant gut. The gut biome with
I was like,
depression even. And
yeah,
so, you know, if you get this syndrome called
yeah.
leaky gut,
Mm-hmm.
you get things in your bloodstream that cause inflammation.
Yeah.
You get a cytokine release, which we got with COVID. Remember the
Mm.
cytokine storm? Well, these are cells that are released to fight intruders.
Mm.
And certainly, food in your bloodstream is an intruder,
Right.
and it causes inflammation. This can cross the blood brain barrier, go into the brain, affect the neurotransmitters. So, your serotonin,
Yeah.
norepinephrine, dopamine all are affected by this
Interesting. Yeah.
and can cause depression.
Yeah.
So, not to say that's the case with all people,
Right.
but you have to at least look at some of these things and
Oh,
understand these things.
watch out your microphone.
Uh,
We'll have a little glitch there with the sound. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, it's proven at this point that your gut health, it affects your serotonin levels. It
Did
affects
you
your
say gut or butt?
oh, that's never gonna die now. Anyways, yeah, the holistic perspective and recognizing too, a lot of times gut imbalances and dysfunction can directly be a result of your lifestyle choices. So your
Right.
diet, your exercise, your stress, your sleep, all kinds of different things.
The water you drink?
Yeah. Yeah. Mold toxicity is another one that's
Hmm.
crazy. I've seen some doctors who specialize in that, and just I mean, depression is one of the symptoms of that. So it's
Hmm.
like, instead of just taking a pill to mask that, which is something that is so, just the prevalency of antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. And then I know with with the elderly population, I mean, it's just like, what's the average 60 plus individual, how many drugs do they take?
Five.
Yeah.
Five
Yeah.
prescriptions every week. So,
So, I mean, it's just, we're not getting healthier as a
right,
society. The drug increase is going up astronomically, or the drug use, but yet we're not getting happier. We're
right.
more depressed than ever, but yet we're having more prescription depression and anxiety medications prescribed. We're not more focused than ever, but yet the attention deficit diagnosis and drug use continues to go up. So, and then our elderly Americans were more unhealthy than ever, but yet it keeps going up. So like, there's a disconnect for
Right,
sure.
right.
And
Well,
yeah.
here's a good story on that. Is that my wife's mother
Mm-hmm.
um, was taking 11 medications and 19 doses per day, and had had multiple TIAs, and then we moved them
What's a
to
TIA?
a trans ischemic accident, kind of like a stroke.
Mm.
And the doctor, you know, kept trying different medications to get this under control. But if you can imagine taking 19 doses per day of
Mm-hmm.
medications, we moved them down here to Ohio. They actually lived with us. We got our medications down to, I think it was 5 and 9 doses per day. So eliminated 10 doses per day, eliminated basically half her medications, she never had another TIA again.
Hmm.
And so what we found in living with her and helping her is that it really had to do with drug compliance, and sometimes taking less than she should have, and then sometimes taking more. And when you have that many drugs involved, if you have the day where you take more,
Mm.
it can be a real issue.
Mm.
And so just a great example of somebody that was over medicated. But I've had
Interesting.
patients taking 20 plus drugs.
Wow.
And who in their right mind would ever think that 20 plus drugs would be the right thing to do?
Yikes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think in your years of working in a pharmacy, did you see the amount of drugs per person and the prescribing of, like, let's say, a lot of these very, very common medications that we see? Did you see an astronomical increase in your time working in the pharmacy?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, over the 40 years, it went from typically the elderly, a person taking one or two medications, to now five every week.
Hmm.
The average, if you look at a general population, like in a Medicaid population, the overall average, kids and adults together, is about two medications per week per patient.
Hmm.
So, that's a lot when you're throwing a whole population in together.
Hmm.
I mean, right now, 1 in 6 Americans are on an antidepressant drug.
Mm-hmm.
It's higher in people your age and younger.
Yeah, a lot higher.
It's about 25%.
Yeah.
Um, no one complains about being sad. Everyone's depressed today. And we've been psyoped into believing that sadness is a chemical imbalance,
Oh,
and it
yeah.
may or may not be the case.
Yeah.
Exercise and diet are two of the most effective methods to treat depression. Maybe this inflammation, you talk about mold being a problem.
Yeah.
Mold sets up inflammation because
Right.
it's an invader, and you get the cytokine response,
Mm-hmm.
and it sets up inflammation, which can certainly cause depression.
Right.
You get the release of
Absolutely.
cortisol, disrupts sleep, disrupts
Absolutely.
concentration.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I will say, I mean, personally, I've had times in my life where I could be or I would be considered depressed.
right.
And I mean, I absolutely would have been clinic. I was never clinically, like, went to a psychologist or anything. I saw lots of counselors, and at one point I took a it was like an anxiety survey or something, and I was
Mm-hmm.
off the charts. I mean, off the charts. But the and this is just a personal example for me, one of the major culprits and reasons for that was hormonal imbalances,
Mm.
because I was going through a couple of different periods of time. One time I was just really struggling with binge eating, and my hormones were all out of whack because my nutrition was all out of whack. My exercise was all out of whack. I was over exercising. That was during college, when I
Mm-hmm.
would have definitely been had the label of depressed for sure. And then post show, after I was recovering and I had no body fat and my
Right.
hormone, no cycle, no, I mean, so my serotonin was probably in the tank. And so that's just, obviously, that's just one example. But I think digging in deeper too, are you on birth control? Are you taking supplementation that affects your hormones? Are you over exercising, under eating, and too lean? That may be affecting your
Mm-hmm.
current state.
And then even
Um,
omega-3s have been shown
yeah,
to be a help with
right.
um, depression.
So it's
So,
not always like a black and white thing too, and I think that that's
mm-hmm.
where having a health, gosh, I mean, someone who can ask,
Holistic
yes,
approach.
yes,
Yeah.
holistic approach is so important, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm very glad that the counselor I was seeing wasn't just so quick to give me, or recommend an antidepressant, because he helped me work through some of those things and address, okay, are you still recovering from your show? Are you still placing your, there's all kinds of things that can go on. And I think a lot of times too, especially as women, when we experience some hormonal fluctuations and just natural changes throughout the month, because we have 4 different phases of our month,
Very complicated.
we have emotions that go up and down. We then think there's something wrong with me,
Right.
where it may not be ideal. You may, like my personal example, I definitely was jacked up hormonally, and that was affecting my mentality and struggling with some of that anxiety and depression at times. But it could just be that it's going to take a couple of months
Mm.
to normalize that. Oh, that's your alarm. God's in
That
control and we
happened
are
last
not. I
time.
know. So,
So I did want to say something about
yeah.
this. I mean, if you go to, like, for instance, a psychiatrist, it's almost guaranteed you're going to get a medication. Even though most people that are given medications for depression, usually it's first prescribed by a general
Mm,
practitioner who probably has very little business prescribing anything prior to the patient going through cognitive therapy
yeah. And that's
counseling.
another thing too,
Yeah.
addressing having that as a first line of defense is, have you actually taken time to go through counseling
Mm.
and talk to a therapist and get to the root of the issue? And man, I mean, I too, I would be, I even know personally, like I think about it and I'm like, man, if I did not get sunshine attempt to get sunshine, be
Hmm.
outside, make sure my vitamin D levels are like all of those things, like I would struggle every single day
Right,
tremendously.
right. We got to get outside. 90% of the
Yeah.
time we're inside now. And so we've got to
That's a huge problem
really,
with depression as well.
really make an effort to get
Well,
outside.
and I think too, if one thing was revealed, one thing, multitude of things were revealed, but an aspect of the pandemic that really was revealed was that the depression rates just went through the roof, and anxiety, depression, etc. Obviously it was a
Hmm.
very uncertain time,
Hmm.
but we were inside, we weren't around other people, we weren't social. Like, as humans, we're social beings. It doesn't matter if you're an
Hmm.
introvert or extrovert. We are created to be in community with humans. So
Right.
I think that's another thing that counseling can undercover, or that can peer undercover, peel back the layers and see, okay, are you in need of people in your life? If you don't have any support in your life, then
And
it's
what
going
are
to be
your
really difficult.
expectations
Yeah,
too of life?
of life,
And right.
because no
So,
one is happy all the time, that's for sure.
well,
um
personally, one that's really near and dear to me is attention deficit, because
oh,
I would have definitely been diagnosed as having a little attention deficit when I was young.
right.
Um, but we didn't use medications back then. We used behavioral modification. And it was like, well, if little Mr. Rutherford can't be quiet, he gets to go out in the hall and get himself under control. But today, there's 13% of the boys and 6% of the girls are diagnosed with um, attention deficit, and most, 62%, are prescribed medications. Less than half get behavioral counseling and how to deal with this. And so, in 62%, too, if the drug doesn't really treat the condition adequately, what do you think they do?
Ramp up the dose.
Increase the dose.
Yeah.
And so, as you increase the dose or the number of medications, you increase the side effects.
Yeah.
And you got a kid where you've dulled a part of their being, part of their personality. And a lot of these kids are very creative.
Yeah.
I was very creative. But, and
Brad's a
so if you
creative
medicate it away, then you've really
yeah.
stolen something from the kid. Only 15% of the kids that are diagnosed with this get behavioral treatment alone.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Parents trying that first. So,
Well, and I will also say that, I mean, it's 2 times higher, the diagnosis for boys versus girls, correct?
right.
The way that I learned was so much different than, I have a brother who's 2 years older than me, Michael, and the way that he learned was, I mean, vastly different. But now, as adults, I mean, his IQ is probably way higher than mine.
Pretty
but
high.
yet, but yet in school, I was like so able to sit down and take tests, and I was rewarded for that. I always got exceptional grades. I
Right.
always was like very high in my class, and do all those standardized tests. I did so great. But then nowadays it's like, okay, someone like, a boy maybe wouldn't have done as well on those tests, but yet I see a perfect example in like how differently Michael is wired and how he's so much, I feel like he's so much more brilliant than me. But that goes to show you, like, I was, the exceptional off the charts student, but yet I don't think that says anything about intellect overall. And
Well,
so,
so the question is
yeah,
it the kid or is it the school
yeah. And a
system
lot of our
that we
schools,
currently have? Yep.
I think, curate their teaching style to how a girl
Girls do,
learn,
right?
how a girl learns, and
Absolutely do.
most teachers are women too. So I think about that. Like, if I was a teacher, I'd probably teach in the way I would want to be taught. I know I coach in the way that I want to be coached, and so I have mostly female clients, right? So
And here's something that's
yeah.
really significant in terms of your healthcare is that our education system naturally misselects the best people for medical care. If you talk to most physicians and most pharmacists, and I don't know this for nurses particularly, but I know it for sure with pharmacists because I taught them, is that very few of them are creative.
Mm,
And so they're very good at rote memory. They're good at learning protocols. They can be very robotic and matter of fact. It's white and black to them.
mm,
And physicians are often the same way.
mm,
And they, just like the rest of society too, don't like to wait for finding the right solution for an individual.
mm,
They want a drug for a problem and,
mm,
give you a formula and send you on your way.
mm.
And you need creative healthcare workers, um,
Yeah,
somebody that's really going to listen to you and
yeah,
help you find what's right for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. So what would be your, as we wrap up here, recommendations for those that are listening as they walk away from this, and things that they can do in their own life to empower them to make these decisions for themselves?
Yeah, so since many people listening to this probably are on medications or maybe have a health issue that they're trying to determine the best treatment for that, I just wanted to share with you some rules for safe drug use. And I'm really adapting this from something called publiccitizens.org that was started by Ralph Nader, who did Consumer Reports and
Mm,
but they have this publication called Worst Pills, Best Pills News. And so,
is this something that people could look up?
oh, you absolutely can go there and you can get a ton of information there without a subscription.
Mm,
I would suggest that if you use it on a regular basis, subscribe just to
mm-hmm.
support them.
Yeah.
But number one, you should review all your medications. Basically, put them all in a bag, prescription, over the counter, and vitamins, herbal products, whatever you use, and have a pharmacist who you trust go through those with you. And you want to look for a pharmacist whose goal is to minimize the number of drugs that you use, not
Mm-hmm.
somebody that's interested in a drug for every condition.
Mm,
You want to ensure that the therapy that you're being treated with is really needed. Are there other treatment options?
mm-hmm.
If there are other options, what are they? And what's the comparison of how they work and how successful they are? Um, you need to question whether or not the dosages are appropriate
Mm-hmm.
for you. Dosages
Mm,
differ by age, health status, and then also by the number of other drugs that
mm,
you're taking and how they affect that medication.
mm.
Um, and then you need to question your doctor. Are they treating a condition or a symptom of something else? You
Yeah.
know? So maybe it's totally unnecessary. And then
Yeah.
I would say that every 4 to 6 months, you really question whether the drug therapy you're on is needed.
Mm.
About 75% of us, if we just lost weight, would need high blood pressure medication, right? And
And I
so,
recently heard the stat that 80% of adults are overweight.
yeah, well, if
Yeah.
if you have high blood pressure, keep taking your medication, but commit yourself to losing the weight,
Mm.
doing the exercise, getting outside.
Right.
It can make a dramatic difference in
Right.
your blood
Right.
pressure. And get out of this cycle in our society of always having too much cortisol and always having all these irritants in your system. they're going to raise your blood pressure.
On your phone like this before you go to bed.
Right.
I don't think that does anything for your
No, it
for your cortisol
doesn't
levels
help you
that's
sleep.
beneficial.
Doesn't help you sleep.
Oh.
You need to question whether or not you're having any adverse reactions to a drug. If something's going on you can't explain, again, talk to a good pharmacist or your physician about it, and just question whether or not it could be your medication. Any new symptom that comes up after starting a new drug is probably due to the new drug. And so you really need to question if something new crops up after starting a medication, whether it's due to the medication. I tell you one that is just so common is patients start taking a statin medication for cholesterol. And then they come to me and they say, I'm washed out. Guess what? It's a statin. And so you really got to question those side effects. And then make sure if you get a medication that you verify the appropriateness of the directions, and make sure your understanding is clear on the directions. There's so many things I've seen over the years where patients have assumed they understand what it means and they're taking the medication entirely wrong. If you have old drugs that you've stopped, throw them away. Don't save them, for your neighbors or your friends or for, sometime down the road. And then have a primary care physician or a personal pharmacist that can kind of manage all of your drug therapy and coordinate it if you have various healthcare providers. You might have an orthopedic, endocrinologist, primary care, all prescribing different things. And one person really should help consolidate and manage all of that information.
Great tips. All right. We'll wrap it up there, and we will be back again with another episode.
We have a lot more that we could talk about, right?
So next time, what is it that you want to focus on? Give everyone a little teaser.
I think navigating pharmaceutical treatments, like common drug categories that you might want to think twice about before you take them.
Like a statin.
Yeah, like a statin. High blood pressure, how to look at that. If you're going into your doctor and having your blood pressure taken twice within 5 minutes and you have high blood pressure, you might want to question that. That's not the ideal way to get your blood pressure. And then you also need to look at it based on your age. Someone at my age, 120/80 is not necessarily the goal, right? So if I'm 135/70, I'm totally happy with that. So just maybe talking about that.
And maybe cholesterol too.
Cholesterol.
And then also Ozempic. We have been seeing a lot of that. So we'll leave it there. Teaser for next time.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching.
Okay, everybody.
See you again.
See ya.